Betrayal almost never announces itself with anger, confrontation, or open hostility. That is the first illusion most people fall for. We expect betrayal to look dramatic, to arrive with raised voices, visible tension, or an obvious rupture. But betrayal that arrives loudly is usually clumsy, emotional, and unplanned. The betrayals that actually succeed, the ones that leave people blindsided, arrive quietly, wrapped in normalcy, routine, and apparent calm. This is why the most dangerous betrayals are preceded not by chaos, but by silence. When someone is preparing to betray you, their primary goal is not aggression. It is safety, psychological safety, social safety, reputational safety. Betrayal is a risky act, and the human mind is wired to reduce risk before acting. Silence becomes the tool that lowers exposure. Silence allows emotional distance to grow without triggering alarms. Silence allows plans to form without resistance. Silence allows justification to mature internally without external challenge. This is the core reason betrayal does not begin with conflict. It begins with quiet withdrawal. Most people are trained from an early age to watch for threats that are visible. We are taught to notice anger, criticism, disrespect, or open rivalry. But betrayal operates on a different channel. It depends on your continued trust, and trust is easiest to maintain when nothing appears wrong. This is why the earliest warnings of betrayal are subtle shifts, not events. A change in tone, a change in timing, a change in emotional availability. None of these feel dangerous in isolation. Together, they form a pattern, but only if you are looking for it. This is the central problem. People don't fail to detect betrayal because they are foolish. They fail because they are watching the wrong signals. They monitor behavior instead of absence. They track words instead of silence. They listen for insults instead of noticing indifference. Silence feels neutral. Calm feels safe. Distance feels temporary, and so the mind fills in the gaps with optimistic explanations. They are busy. They are stressed. Nothing is wrong. This self-soothing narrative is exactly what allows betrayal to progress unnoticed. The psychology behind this is uncomfortable but precise. Before betraying someone, most individuals must resolve internal conflict. They must quiet guilt, suppress empathy, and reduce emotional friction. Silence helps with all three. By speaking less, they feel less accountable. By engaging less, they feel less connected. By explaining nothing, they avoid contradiction. Silence is not emptiness, it is preparation. It is the psychological space where betrayal becomes possible. This is why the title of this documentary matters. 10 silent warnings someone is preparing to betray you. Not 10 behaviors. Not 10 personality traits. 10 warnings. Signals that only appear when you stop looking for drama and start observing patterns of disengagement. Betrayal does not start when the knife is drawn. It starts when emotional presence fades and is not replaced with explanation. Another reason silence is so effective is that it exploits social norms. We are taught that giving space is respectful, that not prying is mature, that calm relationships are healthy, and often they are. But silence becomes dangerous when it replaces connection without context. When closeness is withdrawn without conflict, when alignment dissolves without discussion. These moments feel too minor to challenge, yet too consistent to ignore, if you know what you're looking at. Throughout this documentary, we will examine 10 specific silent warnings that appear again and again before betrayal in relationships, friendships, workplaces, and alliances. Each warning represents a psychological step in the betrayer's internal process. None of them require malice. None of them require evil intent, but all of them indicate preparation. Preparation to detach, preparation to replace, preparation to act without your involvement. This is not about becoming paranoid. Paranoia looks for enemies everywhere. Awareness looks for patterns over time. The difference matters. The goal here is not to accuse, confront, or control. The goal is recognition. Because once you can recognize the quiet signals, betrayal loses its greatest advantage: surprise. Betrayal succeeds when it feels sudden. In reality, it is almost always gradual. It whispers long before it strikes. And the tragedy is not that people are betrayed, it's that they were warned quietly and didn't know how to listen. Every betrayal shares one psychological requirement. The person being betrayed must remain unaware long enough for the act to succeed. This is not a moral observation, it is a functional one. Betrayal is not impulsive aggression. It is calculated risk management, and awareness is risk. When someone prepares to betray you, they are not thinking in terms of cruelty or honesty. They are thinking in terms of exposure. Will this create conflict? Will this damage my reputation? Will this provoke retaliation? Will this fail if discovered too early? These questions quietly shape their behavior, and the safest answer to all of them is the same: keep you unaware. This is why silence is not accidental, it is strategic, often unconsciously so. Silence minimizes friction. It prevents conversations that could trigger resistance or force commitment. It delays moral reckoning. Most importantly, it preserves access. As long as you feel nothing is wrong, the betrayer maintains proximity, leverage, and optionality. Awareness would force a choice. Silence allows postponement. Understanding this is critical to understanding the silent warnings someone is preparing to betray you. These warnings are not random personality quirks. They are side effects of a mind attempting to move from loyalty to disloyalty without suffering consequences. Betrayal is psychologically expensive. It produces guilt, fear, and internal contradiction. Silence is the anesthetic. Consider how people behave when they intend to leave a job secretly, exit a relationship dishonestly, or undermine a partner without detection. They rarely announce dissatisfaction. They rarely escalate conflict. Instead, they reduce engagement. They delay decisions. They emotionally flatten. This quiet withdrawal is not kindness, it is preparation. The less emotionally present they are, the easier it becomes to act against you later. Another reason betrayal requires your unawareness is narrative control. Humans need to see themselves as reasonable, justified, and fair. A betrayer constructs an internal story in which their actions are necessary, inevitable, or deserved. Silence helps this story solidify. Without dialogue, there is no counter-narrative. Without your perspective, their version of events goes unchallenged. Silence protects the story they need to believe about themselves. This is why early confrontation often fails once silent warnings appear. When you ask, "Is something wrong?" and receive vague reassurance, you are not being spared conflict, you are being managed. The betrayer is not ready to act yet, and your awareness threatens the timing. Silence resumes, not because the issue is resolved, but because it must remain unresolved for the plan to continue. There is also a power dynamic at work. Awareness redistributes power. When both parties know what is happening, decisions become mutual. Silence preserves asymmetry. One person prepares, the other continues as usual. This imbalance is essential to betrayal. It allows the betrayer to line up alternatives, gather support, or reduce dependency without interference. Awareness would force negotiation. Silence avoids it. This explains a crucial pattern you will see across all 10 silent warnings. The betrayer appears calm, while the situation subtly worsens for you. They are not agitated because they are not uncertain. They have already begun detaching internally. You, on the other hand, sense something is off but cannot locate the threat. This mismatch, your confusion and their calm, is one of the earliest indicators that unawareness is being preserved deliberately. Social norms further protect this process. We are discouraged from questioning distance. We are taught to respect privacy, independence, and space. Betrayal exploits this politeness. The betrayer relies on your restraint to avoid scrutiny. Every time you choose not to ask, not to press, not to notice, the preparation deepens. Silence compounds. It is important to emphasize that not all silence is betrayal. People withdraw for many reasons: stress, fatigue, personal struggle. The difference lies in pattern and direction. Silence that heals returns connection. Silence that prepares betrayal moves consistently away from it. That is why the warnings are cumulative. One sign proves nothing. Multiple signals over time tell a story. This section exists to anchor everything that follows. The 10 silent warnings we will examine are not moral judgments. They are indicators of a specific psychological condition, someone needing you not to see what is coming. Once you understand why unawareness is required, the signals stop feeling ambiguous. They begin to feel structured. Betrayal does not need hatred. It needs time. Silence provides it. As we move forward, each warning will show a different way unawareness is preserved. Emotionally, socially, informationally. And with each one, the same question will apply. Is this silence creating distance without explanation? If the answer is yes, awareness is already being treated as a threat. That realization is not meant to make you suspicious of everyone. It is meant to restore balance. Because when silence is no longer invisible to you, betrayal loses its safest hiding place. Betrayal rarely begins with an action. It begins with a substitution. Before someone betrays you, they usually replace you mentally first. This is the most overlooked stage of betrayal, and it is where silence becomes most active. Replacement is not physical at the beginning, it is psychological. A person slowly imagines a future where you are no longer central, no longer necessary, no longer included. Once that imagined future feels stable, betrayal stops feeling like a risk and starts feeling like a transition. This is why silence increases before betrayal. Replacement requires mental space. Emotional conversations interfere with that space. Engagement creates attachment, and attachment complicates exit. So the mind begins to reduce contact, soften bonds, and lower emotional volume. Silence is not avoidance, it is incubation. It allows the betrayer to rehearse a future without you while still benefiting from your presence in the present. This is a critical silent warning someone is preparing to betray you when they are still physically present but psychologically elsewhere. They show up but without investment. They listen but without curiosity. They respond but without continuity. These are not signs of exhaustion alone. They are signs of internal reassignment. Replacement thinking follows a predictable pattern. First, comparison. The person begins evaluating alternatives, other people, other alliances, other roles, other paths. This comparison often happens quietly and privately. They do not announce dissatisfaction, they simply begin measuring. Silence protects this stage because explanation would require justification, and justification would slow the process. Next comes emotional downgrading. To replace you, they must lower your perceived value internally. This does not require criticism or conflict. In fact, criticism creates engagement. Silence works better. Your absence from their emotional center slowly makes their future feel possible without you. Indifference replaces affection. Neutrality replaces loyalty. This is not accidental, it is necessary. What makes this stage so dangerous is that nothing appears wrong on the surface. There may be no arguments. No betrayal has occurred yet. And because nothing concrete has happened, the mind resists suspicion. This is why the psychology of replacement is one of the most reliable silent warnings. Someone is preparing to betray you. The betrayal feels sudden only because the replacement phase was invisible. Silence also reduces guilt during this process. Betrayal creates cognitive dissonance. I am a good person versus I am about to harm someone. Silence resolves this tension by creating distance. The less the betrayer engages with you, the less empathy is triggered. The less empathy is triggered, the easier it becomes to act against you later. This emotional numbing is not cruelty, it is self-regulation. Another key sign of replacement thinking is the shift from shared future language to isolated present language. We becomes I. Plans become vague. Commitments become conditional. This is not because they are uncertain, it is because they are certain in private and undecided in public. Silence bridges that gap. Importantly, replacement does not always mean another person. It can be a role, a status, an opportunity, or a strategic advantage. A colleague replaces you with leverage. A partner replaces you with security. A friend replaces you with convenience. In all cases, silence plays the same role. It keeps you from interfering with the transition. This is why people often say, after betrayal, they changed overnight. But the truth is quieter. The change happens slowly, internally, while behavior remained just stable enough to avoid detection. Replacement thinking allows someone to leave emotionally long before they leave structurally. This section matters because it reframes betrayal from an event into a process. And once you understand replacement as the core mechanism, silence stops being confusing. It becomes diagnostic. You stop asking, why are they distant? And start asking, who or what is replacing this connection internally? That question is not paranoid, it is precise. Replacement before betrayal is not proof of malice. It is proof of preparation. And preparation always leaves traces, not in words, not in conflict, but in quiet disengagement that no longer reverses. This is exactly why the next sections will focus on specific, observable, silent warnings. Each one reveals a different way replacement shows itself before betrayal becomes visible. And once you can see replacement forming, silence stops being ambiguous. It becomes information. Betrayal does not begin with the act. It begins the moment someone no longer needs you emotionally, but still needs you strategically. The earliest silent warning someone is preparing to betray you is not anger. It is the quiet reduction of emotional investment without any visible conflict. This is the stage that confuses most people. There are no fights to point to, no clear disagreements, no obvious reason to worry. And yet, something feels thinner. Conversations lose depth, responses shorten, emotional resonance fades. The connection still exists, but it no longer feels inhabited. This is not accidental. Emotional investment is costly. It requires attention, empathy, and presence. When someone is preparing to betray you, they begin conserving these resources, not because they hate you, but because they are reallocating internally. Silence becomes the mechanism through which this reallocation happens. What makes this warning so dangerous is its politeness. Reduced emotional investment often looks like maturity, busyness, or calm. The person isn't hostile, they aren't demanding, they aren't volatile. In fact, they may seem easier to deal with than before. But this ease comes from disengagement, not harmony. A critical detail here is the absence of conflict. Conflict still implies investment. Arguing means the relationship matters enough to fight for. Silence means it no longer does. When emotional investment drops without explanation, it signals that the person has stopped trying to influence outcomes with you. That shift is rarely neutral. You may notice that they no longer ask follow-up questions. They listen, but they don't build on what you say. They respond, but they don't remember details later. Emotional memory fades when investment fades. This is one of the clearest silent warnings someone is preparing to betray you, because it reflects an internal decision that has not yet been expressed externally. Importantly, this withdrawal happens before replacement is visible. They are not gone yet. They still benefit from the relationship, but they are no longer nurturing it. This creates a one-sided dynamic where you are maintaining something that they are quietly exiting. Many people misinterpret this stage and try to fix it by giving more understanding, more patience, more emotional availability. This often accelerates betrayal. Why? Because it confirms that the relationship can be extracted from without resistance. Silence deepens when it is rewarded. This warning becomes undeniable when the emotional distance does not rebound. Everyone has off days. Everyone pulls back temporarily. But when emotional investment decreases and stays decreased, without explanation, without repair, that is not fluctuation. That is direction. Reduced emotional investment without conflict is not proof of betrayal by itself, but it is the first structural condition required for betrayal to occur. It creates distance. It lowers empathy. It makes replacement easier. The defensive insight here is simple but difficult. Stop evaluating relationships only by the presence of conflict. Start evaluating them by the presence of care. Silence that removes care without explanation is not peace, it is preparation. And this is only the first warning. One of the clearest silent warnings someone is preparing to betray you is a sudden neutrality toward your success or failure. This shift is subtle because neutrality feels reasonable. It doesn't feel hostile. It doesn't feel cruel. In fact, it often passes as emotional maturity. But psychologically, neutrality is not the absence of feeling. It is the withdrawal of alignment. And alignment is what betrayal requires to dissolve. When someone is invested in you, your outcomes matter to them. Your wins activate pride. Your losses activate concern. This emotional mirroring is not sentimental, it is functional. It binds people together. When that mirroring disappears, something foundational has changed. The reason this warning appears before betrayal is simple. Emotional investment creates moral resistance. It is harder to act against someone whose outcomes you still care about. Neutrality removes that resistance. By becoming indifferent to whether you succeed or fail, the betrayer reduces internal friction. Silence helps maintain this state. Expressing concern would reawaken empathy. Celebrating your success would reaffirm connection. Neutrality avoids both. This change often appears as a lack of reaction rather than a negative one. You share good news and receive a brief acknowledgement. You mention a problem and receive a non-committal response. There is no encouragement, no discouragement, just emotional flatness. This flatness is one of the most reliable silent warnings someone is preparing to betray you, because it signals that your trajectory is no longer emotionally linked to theirs. Importantly, neutrality is selective. They may still be warm in general conversation. They may still be polite. But when it comes to your advancement, your stability, or your vulnerability, their emotional engagement vanishes. This selectivity reveals intent. It shows where detachment is being applied deliberately. Many people misread this warning as independence. They're just letting me do my own thing. But independence still includes goodwill. Neutrality strips that away. It says, psychologically, your outcomes are no longer my concern. That is not distance, it is disengagement. This warning also often coincides with a subtle shift in comparison. Your success no longer inspires. Your failure no longer alarms. This is because replacement thinking has begun. Their emotional energy is being redirected elsewhere, toward another person, another opportunity, or another identity. Neutrality protects that redirection from guilt. The danger of this stage is that it feels safe. There is no overt harm, no criticism, no attack, and so it is easy to ignore. But betrayal rarely begins with opposition. It begins when your outcomes stop mattering. The defensive insight here is not to demand enthusiasm or reassurance. That only forces performance. Instead, observe consistency. If neutrality persists across moments that normally require alignment, you are not witnessing calm, you are witnessing preparation. Silence does not always mean peace. Sometimes it means you are no longer being factored into the future. This warning deepens the pattern. Betrayal advances as emotional relevance disappears. When someone is preparing to betray you, they rarely lie more. They simply tell you less. This is one of the most consistent silent warnings someone is preparing to betray you, the quiet narrowing of information flow. Details arrive later than they used to. Context disappears. Decisions are mentioned after they are already made. You are not excluded outright, you are slowly deprioritized. Information is power. Shared information signals inclusion. Withheld information signals repositioning. When someone begins limiting what you know, they are reducing your ability to respond, influence, or interfere. Silence becomes a protective barrier around their intent. What makes this warning difficult to detect is its gradual nature. There is no clear cutoff point. Conversations still happen, updates still come, but they are thinner, less specific, less timely. This thinning is not forgetfulness, it is filtration. Psychologically, this serves two purposes. First, it preserves control. If you do not have full information, you cannot challenge the direction things are moving. Second, it reduces accountability. The less you know, the fewer explanations are required. Silence replaces justification. This pattern often appears alongside phrases like, "I didn't think it was important," or "I was going to tell you later." These statements are not explanations, they are boundary markers. They quietly redefine your relevance. When information flow narrows without discussion, it signals that your role is being adjusted downward. This is a crucial silent warning someone is preparing to betray you, because betrayal requires asymmetry. One person must know more, prepare more, and decide earlier. Silence creates this imbalance without confrontation. You continue operating under old assumptions while they move under new ones. It is also important to notice the emotional tone around withheld information. There is often calm, not defensiveness. Calm indicates resolution. They are not worried about your reaction because they are not invested in your input. That calm is not confidence, it is detachment. Many people respond to this warning by trying to regain access. They ask more questions, they push for clarity. This can backfire. Increased questioning alerts the betrayer that awareness is rising, which often leads to further information restriction rather than openness. Silence deepens when it feels threatened. The defensive insight here is observation, not pursuit. Track patterns, not excuses. Occasional delays happen. Systematic narrowing does not happen by accident. When information consistently arrives late, incomplete, or secondhand, you are no longer inside the decision-making circle. Silence in information flow is not neutral, it is structural. It reshapes power quietly. And once information is no longer shared freely, betrayal no longer feels distant. It feels inevitable, because preparation is already underway. One of the most deceptive silent warnings someone is preparing to betray you is the split between how they treat you privately and how they treat you publicly. In public settings, everything appears normal. They are polite, friendly, cooperative. There is no visible tension. Others see stability, even harmony. But in private, something is missing. The warmth is gone. The depth is gone. The engagement is minimal. This contrast is not accidental. It is camouflage. Betrayal requires reputation management. The betrayer must preserve social normalcy while withdrawing emotionally from you. Public normalcy protects their image. Private distance protects their plan. Silence is the bridge between the two. By saying less in private and maintaining appearances in public, they minimize suspicion while maximizing control. This warning is particularly dangerous because it isolates you. When you sense distance, but everyone else sees friendliness, self-doubt grows. You question your perception. You hesitate to speak up. This psychological isolation is not a side effect, it is a feature. Silence works best when it makes the observer doubt themselves. Private distance often shows up as lack of availability. Conversations are shorter. Time is limited. Emotional topics are avoided. There is no hostility, just absence. Meanwhile, in public interactions, the person appears unchanged. This duality signals that the withdrawal is selective, not circumstantial. This is a critical silent warning someone is preparing to betray you, because it shows intent to manage outcomes rather than resolve issues. If something were wrong and repair were desired, the distance would appear publicly as well. Instead, the problem is contained privately, where it can be controlled. The psychological function of this pattern is simple. It keeps you compliant. Public normalcy removes urgency. Private distance removes influence. You are left in a state of confusion rather than resistance. Silence fills the gap where clarity should be. Many people misinterpret this warning as emotional privacy or stress, but stress spills outward. Strategic distance does not. When someone carefully preserves public warmth while privately disengaging, they are separating perception from reality. That separation is essential to betrayal. The defensive insight here is to trust patterns over appearances. Public behavior is designed for observers. Private behavior reveals intent. If warmth disappears only where accountability exists, silence is no longer benign. Betrayal needs witnesses to see stability and targets to feel uncertainty. This warning accomplishes both at once. Silence does not always hide absence. Sometimes it hides intention. One of the most revealing silent warnings someone is preparing to betray you is what they do when you are not present to observe it. Specifically, it is the moment they stop defending you in your absence. Loyalty is rarely tested in direct conversation. It is tested when narratives are formed without you, when criticism appears, when assumptions are made, when pressure arises. Silence in these moments is not neutrality, it is permission. When someone is aligned with you, they instinctively correct false impressions. They clarify misunderstandings. They resist unfair framing. This does not require confrontation or aggression. It happens naturally because your reputation is emotionally connected to theirs. When that connection weakens, defense fades. This warning often surfaces indirectly. You hear later that something was said and not challenged, that a decision was made and they stayed out of it, that they didn't contradict a harmful assumption because they didn't want to get involved. These explanations mask a deeper shift. They are no longer willing to spend social capital on your behalf. This is a powerful silent warning someone is preparing to betray you because betrayal requires moral distancing. By allowing negative narratives to stand, they psychologically reposition themselves away from you. Silence helps them feel less responsible for what happens next. It is important to note that decreased defense does not always look like agreement. Often, it looks like absence. They change the subject. They remain quiet. They let others speak for them. This passive behavior is more telling than open criticism because it avoids accountability while still allowing damage. Why does this happen before betrayal? Because betrayal requires justification. If others already view you as flawed, unreliable, or expendable, the betrayer feels safer acting against you. Silence allows these narratives to form without resistance. Many people excuse this warning as conflict avoidance, but avoidance has direction. When someone avoids conflict only when your interests are at stake, it signals a shift in allegiance. Silence becomes alignment with whoever holds more power in the room. The defensive insight here is uncomfortable but clarifying. Loyalty is measured in absence, not presence. If someone repeatedly remains silent when your name is questioned, your value to them has already been renegotiated. Betrayal rarely starts with action. It starts when protection quietly disappears. And silence is the sound of that disappearance. When someone is preparing to betray you, their language changes before their behavior does. One of the most telling silent warnings someone is preparing to betray you is the sudden appearance of self-protection language. Phrases that create distance, statements that limit responsibility, words that quietly redraw boundaries that used to be implicit. You may hear things like, "I don't want to get involved, that's not really my role," or "I need to look out for myself." On the surface, these statements sound reasonable, even healthy, but timing matters. When self-protection language emerges in situations that previously involved shared responsibility, it signals a psychological exit in progress. Language reveals internal positioning. When someone begins emphasizing their separateness, they are reducing perceived obligation. This is not about assertiveness. It is about insulation. Self-protection language creates a buffer between them and the consequences of what is about to happen. This warning appears before betrayal because it lowers guilt. By redefining responsibility early, the betrayer can later say, internally or externally, that they were never fully involved. Silence supports this reframing. Less explanation means fewer contradictions. Less engagement means fewer expectations. A key detail is that this language often appears calmly. There is no anger, no defensiveness. Calm indicates that the boundary has already been accepted internally. They are not negotiating it, they are informing you of a shift that has already occurred. This is a critical silent warning someone is preparing to betray you because betrayal requires plausible deniability. Self-protection language creates it in advance. When the act occurs, they can point back and say, "I told you I wasn't involved," even if the involvement was assumed for years. Many people misinterpret this as personal growth or self-care. But self-care does not erase shared obligations without discussion. When boundaries change without dialogue, silence is doing the work. The danger of this warning is that it normalizes disengagement. Each statement feels minor. Each instance seems justifiable. But over time, a pattern forms. They are systematically removing themselves from shared accountability. The defensive insight here is to notice shifts in language, not just tone. Words that emphasize separation, neutrality, or detachment, when new, signal internal repositioning. Silence makes these shifts easier to ignore, but no less meaningful. Betrayal does not require hostility, it requires distance. And distance often announces itself first in words that sound harmless. Before someone betrays you, they rarely stand alone. They align elsewhere first. One of the most consistent silent warnings someone is preparing to betray you is increased alignment with alternatives, other people, other groups, other opportunities, or other identities. This alignment often begins quietly, without announcement and without explanation. Silence protects it while it strengthens. Betrayal requires a landing place. Few people leap without a net. Alignment with alternatives provides psychological safety. It reduces fear, it creates justification, and most importantly, it makes the loss of your relationship feel survivable. This warning often appears as subtle shifts in attention. New conversations dominate their interest. New alliances receive their energy. New priorities quietly outrank shared ones. They don't abandon you outright. They simply invest elsewhere more consistently. Silence allows this redistribution to occur without confrontation. What makes this a powerful silent warning someone is preparing to betray you is overlap. The new alignment does not wait until the old bond is formally ended. It grows in parallel. This overlap is not accidental. It allows the betrayer to transition smoothly while minimizing emotional cost. You may notice that they speak more positively about others while remaining neutral toward you, or they reference external validation, new mentors, new teams, new perspectives, more often than shared history. This comparative framing subtly lowers your importance without openly diminishing you. Importantly, increased alignment with alternatives often comes with decreased transparency. You know less about these new connections than you should. Details are vague. Context is missing. Silence creates a buffer that keeps these alignments from scrutiny. If asked directly, the response is often casual. It's nothing serious, or just exploring options. But exploration is directional. Time and energy reveal intent. When someone consistently invests in alternatives while disengaging from you, replacement is no longer hypothetical. Many people dismiss this warning as networking, growth, or expansion, and sometimes it is. The difference lies in exclusion. Growth includes you. Replacement sidelines you. When new alignments grow while your access shrinks, silence is masking a transition. The defensive insight here is to watch for overlap combined with withdrawal. New connections alone mean little. New connections paired with reduced availability, reduced information, and reduced emotional investment mean preparation. Betrayal feels sudden only when the alternative has already been secured. And silence is what keeps that security invisible until it is too late. One of the most understated silent warnings someone is preparing to betray you is their growing reluctance to commit to the future. This does not appear as rejection, it appears as vagueness. Plans are discussed but never finalized, timelines are postponed, decisions are deferred, language becomes non-committal. We'll see, let's talk later. Things are uncertain right now. On the surface, this sounds cautious. Psychologically, it is protective. Commitments create obligations. Obligations create moral friction. Someone preparing to betray you avoids both. By refusing to anchor themselves to future plans, they preserve flexibility. Silence supports this strategy because it prevents scrutiny. The less that is promised, the less that must be explained when things change. This warning is especially revealing when contrasted with the past. If someone once planned easily and now avoids it selectively, especially around shared goals, the shift is intentional. It signals that they do not want to be bound to a future that includes you. Avoidance of future commitments also allows replacement to continue quietly. While you wait, they prepare. While you assume continuity, they assume contingency. Silence keeps these assumptions misaligned. A key feature of this warning is calm detachment. There is no anxiety about the future, no urgency to resolve uncertainty. This calm indicates that the future is already resolved internally, just not with you included. Silence maintains that internal resolution without confrontation. Many people misinterpret this warning as prudence or realism, but prudence still plans within constraints. Avoidance refuses to plan at all. When future-oriented conversations consistently stall, it is not because the future is unclear. It is because clarity would force disclosure. This warning matters because betrayal requires optionality. Commitments close doors. Silence keeps them open. By avoiding future anchors, the betrayer ensures they can pivot without appearing inconsistent. When the break finally happens, it is framed as circumstance, not choice. The defensive insight here is to notice where time stops extending forward. Relationships move through time via shared projection. When projection disappears without explanation, silence is doing its work. Betrayal often feels sudden because the future was quietly removed long before the present changed. And when someone will not walk with you into the future, silence is already telling you why. There are moments when loyalty is not optional, it is required. One of the most decisive silent warnings someone is preparing to betray you is their silence during moments that demand alignment, defense, or support. These are inflection points, accusations, crises, pressure situations, where neutrality is not neutral, it is choice. When someone remains silent during these moments, they are not avoiding conflict. They are revealing where their loyalty no longer resides. Silence becomes a way to let outcomes unfold without personal cost. It allows harm without direct participation. This warning is especially telling because it appears when stakes are highest. Loyalty is easiest when nothing is at risk. It becomes visible only when speaking up would require sacrifice. Silence in these moments signals that the cost of defending you now outweighs the value of the relationship. Psychologically, this silence serves two functions. First, it preserves optionality. If things go well for you, they can re-engage. If things go badly, they can distance themselves. Silence keeps both paths open. Second, it protects self-image. By not acting, they avoid feeling responsible for the outcome. This is a powerful silent warning someone is preparing to betray you because betrayal requires prior disengagement from duty. When someone watches you take damage without intervening, they are rehearsing separation. The emotional bond has already weakened enough to allow harm to occur. Many people excuse this behavior as fear, politeness, or uncertainty. But fear does not erase patterns. When silence consistently appears at moments requiring loyalty, it signals a deliberate choice to not be counted. It is important to notice timing here. Silence after the moment passes is different from silence during it. Post-event explanations often come later, but loyalty is measured in real time. If silence was chosen when action mattered, the explanation afterward is irrelevant. The defensive insight here is to stop measuring loyalty by words and start measuring it by presence under pressure. Silence in ordinary moments means little. Silence in decisive moments means everything. Betrayal does not begin when someone acts against you. It begins when they choose not to act for you. The final silent warning someone is preparing to betray you is not tension. It is calm. When distance appears, less contact, reduced involvement, structural separation, and the other person responds with emotional ease, it signals something decisive. Calm detachment means the internal conflict is already over. The choice has already been made. This is one of the most overlooked silent warnings someone is preparing to betray you because calm is misread as maturity. No anger, no sadness, no regret, just acceptance. But psychologically, this calm does not come from resilience. It comes from completion. Before betrayal, there is anxiety. During preparation, there is silence. After internal resolution, there is calm. That calm appears when the person has already processed guilt, rehearsed justification, and emotionally exited. What looks like composure is actually closure. You may notice that when distance increases, they do not try to repair it. They do not ask questions. They do not express concern. They adapt immediately. This adaptability is not flexibility, it is readiness. Silence allowed them to practice separation long before it became visible. This warning is powerful because it confirms everything that came before. Reduced emotional investment, neutrality, information control, alternative alignment, future avoidance, silence during loyalty tests. Calm detachment is the emotional signature of someone who no longer needs you to stay. Many people mistake this calm for respect, but respect still includes engagement. Calm detachment removes effort entirely. There is no urgency because there is no loss. The relationship has already been replaced internally. This is why betrayal feels sudden at the end. By the time distance becomes obvious to you, it has been familiar to them for a long time. Silence trained them for this moment. Calm is simply the result. The defensive insight here is to stop waiting for emotional signals that will never arrive. When someone is calm about losing you, the loss already happened privately. Betrayal does not always end with hostility. Sometimes it ends with relief. And relief is the quiet proof that silence finished its work long ago. When people finally sense betrayal approaching, their instinct is to confront. They ask questions, they seek reassurance, they demand clarity, they try to clear the air, and almost every time this instinct backfires. Once silent warnings appear, confrontation rarely stops betrayal, it often completes it. The reason is psychological, not tactical. By the time silence has become consistent, emotional withdrawal, information narrowing, future avoidance, the internal decision is already underway. Confrontation does not reopen that decision. It pressures the betrayer to finalize it. This is the first hard truth. Confrontation assumes uncertainty. Silence usually means resolution. When you confront someone who is preparing to betray you, you are not interrupting the process. You are threatening its timing. Awareness becomes a risk. And when risk rises, people accelerate rather than retreat. Confrontation also forces performance. The betrayer is not ready to reveal intent, so they default to reassurance. Nothing is wrong. You're overthinking. Things are just busy right now. These responses are not lies in the traditional sense. They are delay mechanisms. Silence resumes afterward, often thicker than before. This creates a dangerous illusion. You believe the conversation helped. In reality, it only confirmed something crucial for the betrayer, that you feel insecure, uncertain, and still invested. This reassurance-seeking behavior signals that you are unlikely to resist strongly when the separation finally occurs. Another reason confrontation fails is that it validates the betrayer's internal narrative. Remember, betrayal requires justification. When you confront emotionally, accusing, pleading, or demanding, you inadvertently provide evidence that you are difficult, needy, or unstable. Silence allowed them to maintain a clean story. Confrontation gives them material. This is why many betrayals are later rationalized as inevitable or necessary. The confrontation becomes retroactive proof. Confrontation also shifts the power dynamic. Instead of observing patterns, you reveal your position. You show what you fear losing. You expose what you still want preserved. Silence gave you informational disadvantage. Confrontation adds emotional disadvantage. This does not mean you should never speak. It means timing matters. Confrontation works only when both parties are still invested in repair. Silent warnings indicate that repair is no longer the goal. Preservation is. There is another layer most people miss. Confrontation collapses ambiguity, and ambiguity is the last space where you still have leverage. As long as silence exists, the betrayer must maintain appearances. Once confronted, they are forced to choose between denial and exit. Both options move them forward. Notice the pattern. After confrontation, things rarely improve. They either stay superficially calm while distancing increases, or they end abruptly. This is not coincidence, it is consequence. This section exists to reframe what strength looks like in these moments. Strength is not emotional exposure. Strength is restraint, observation, strategic patience. The defensive posture here is not passivity, it is calibration. When silent warnings appear, your goal is not reassurance. It is clarity, internal clarity. You shift from emotional engagement to situational awareness. Instead of asking, "Are we okay?" you ask yourself, "What has changed consistently?" Instead of seeking explanation, you track behavior. Instead of confronting silence, you stop filling it. Silence only works when you carry the emotional weight alone. When you stop compensating, stop over-explaining, stop chasing, stop repairing unilaterally, the pattern reveals itself faster. This is the paradox. Silence loses power when you stop reacting to it. Confrontation fails because it treats betrayal as a misunderstanding. Silent warnings reveal it is a process, and processes do not reverse because they are noticed, they conclude. The final defensive insight of this section is this. Once silent warnings appear, your task is not to stop betrayal. It is to stop being surprised by it. Surprise is what does the damage. Awareness limits it. Betrayal hurts most when it feels sudden. Silence only hurts when you mistake it for safety. And confrontation, at this stage, only helps betrayal finish cleanly. The greatest risk after learning about silent warnings of betrayal is not ignorance. It is paranoia. When people first realize how often betrayal announces itself quietly, they swing too far in the opposite direction. Every pause feels suspicious. Every delay feels intentional. Every moment of distance feels like preparation. This mindset is just as dangerous as blindness because it replaces awareness with anxiety. Reading silence correctly requires discipline. The goal is not to interpret every silence as betrayal. The goal is to recognize when silence follows a pattern that serves preparation. This distinction is what separates situational awareness from paranoia. The first principle is duration over intensity. Genuine distance fluctuates. Preparatory silence stabilizes. A stressed person withdraws and then returns. Someone preparing to betray you withdraws and stays withdrawn. Silence that resolves itself is not a warning. Silence that becomes the new baseline is. The second principle is direction. Ask a simple question. Does this silence move the relationship toward repair or away from it? Healthy distance eventually produces reconnection, explanation, or recalibration. Preparatory silence produces none of these. It quietly reduces access, investment, and shared future without replacing them with clarity. This is why every silent warning discussed in this documentary emphasizes pattern over incident. One neutral response means nothing. 10 neutral responses across moments that once mattered means everything. Paranoia reacts to moments. Awareness tracks trajectories. Another key distinction is reciprocity. Healthy silence is mutual. Both parties pull back and both re-engage. Preparatory silence is asymmetrical. One person withdraws while the other compensates. One becomes quieter while the other becomes more attentive. This imbalance is one of the strongest indicators that silence is serving preparation, not rest. Paranoia also assumes intent immediately. Awareness suspends judgment. You do not need to know why someone is silent to observe that the silence is directional. Motive is often unclear until after betrayal occurs. Pattern is visible long before. This is where many people go wrong. They demand explanations prematurely. They want certainty now, but certainty comes at the cost of leverage. Silence reveals its purpose when you stop trying to force meaning out of it. Another important filter is context consistency. Ask whether silence appears across unrelated situations. Stress-based withdrawal is usually domain-specific. Work stress affects work communication, not personal loyalty. Preparatory silence spreads. It affects emotion, information, planning, and defense. When silence shows up everywhere it matters, it is not circumstantial. Reading silence without paranoia also requires emotional regulation. Silence triggers insecurity because it removes feedback. The mind fills that gap with fear. The defensive move is not to suppress emotion, but to delay interpretation. You notice the signal without immediately assigning motive. This delay is powerful. It prevents overreaction. It prevents confrontation, and it allows patterns to mature enough to be undeniable. Another crucial rule: never read silence in isolation from behavior. Silence paired with continued investment is rest. Silence paired with reduced effort is withdrawal. Silence paired with replacement behaviors is preparation. The combination tells the truth. Paranoia isolates you. Awareness grounds you. Paranoia asks, are they betraying me? Awareness asks, what is consistently changing and who benefits from that change? This shift matters because it keeps you from acting prematurely. Early reactions often reveal more about your fear than their intent. Silence only retains power when you rush to fill it. The final principle is this: you do not need to accuse to protect yourself. Recognition alone changes your posture. You stop oversharing. You stop relying. You stop building plans that assume loyalty that is no longer being demonstrated. This is not manipulation. It is calibration. You meet silence with proportionate distance. You respond to ambiguity with flexibility. You allow behavior, not reassurance, to determine trust. When you can read silence without paranoia, betrayal loses its emotional leverage. It may still occur, but it will not destabilize you. You will not be shocked. You will not be unprepared. Silence stops being frightening when it becomes informative. And that is the final defense. Not certainty, not confrontation, but clarity without urgency. Because the purpose of understanding silent warnings is not to control others. It is to remain sovereign when silence is no longer accidental. Betrayal feels sudden only to the person who experiences it last. By the time betrayal becomes visible, when a decision is announced, an alliance shifts, a relationship ends, the psychological work has already been done. What feels like a moment is, in reality, the conclusion of a long, quiet process. This documentary has not been about villains or victims. It has been about patterns. Specifically, the 10 silent warnings someone is preparing to betray you. Each warning revealed a different stage of preparation. None of them were dramatic. None of them were loud. And that is exactly why they work. Betrayal does not begin with action. It begins with withdrawal. Emotional investment fades. Neutrality replaces alignment. Information narrows. Silence appears where loyalty once lived. Alternatives grow quietly. Futures are left unspoken. And finally, calm arrives when distance becomes real. Seen individually, each signal is easy to excuse. Life is busy. People change. Circumstances shift. But betrayal is not diagnosed through excuses. It is recognized through accumulation. The process becomes visible only when you stop looking for a single decisive moment and start observing direction. This is the central insight. Silence is not the absence of communication. It is a form of communication. Silence tells you where effort has stopped. Silence tells you where obligation has been withdrawn. Silence tells you when a relationship is being kept functional but no longer nurtured. And silence tells you when someone no longer needs you to remain aligned in order to move forward. The tragedy of betrayal is not the act itself. The act is often inevitable once preparation is complete. The real damage comes from surprise, from the shock of realizing too late that the relationship you were protecting no longer existed in the same form. This is why awareness matters, not to prevent all betrayal, that is impossible, but to prevent disorientation, to prevent self-doubt, to prevent the collapse that comes from believing something was stable when it had already shifted. Notice what this framework does not require. It does not require suspicion. It does not require confrontation. It does not require manipulation. It requires attention. Attention to patterns. Attention to consistency. Attention to what changes without explanation and does not return. The purpose of understanding the 10 silent warnings someone is preparing to betray you is not to harden yourself against all connection. It is to recalibrate trust based on behavior rather than hope. Silence loses its power when it is seen clearly. When you recognize the process early, you naturally adjust. You stop over-investing. You stop assuming alignment. You stop planning futures that are no longer mutual. This adjustment is not revenge. It is balance. And balance restores dignity. Betrayal only devastates when it catches you unprepared. When you mistake silence for safety. When you interpret calm as care. When you wait for proof instead of reading patterns. Once you understand that betrayal is a process, not a moment, you stop asking, how could this happen so suddenly? And start recognizing, this has been happening quietly for a long time. That recognition changes everything. It allows you to exit with clarity rather than confusion. It allows you to retain self-trust. And it allows you to move forward without carrying unnecessary bitterness. Silence will always exist in human relationships. Not all silence is dangerous, but silence that consistently removes care, commitment, and protection is not neutral. It is directional. And direction tells the truth long before words do. The final insight is simple, but it is the hardest to accept. People rarely betray you out of nowhere. They betray you after they have already left, emotionally, psychologically, quietly. When you learn to listen to silence, you stop being the last to know. And that is not cynicism. That is awareness.